History often paints early humans as bumbling, clueless grunters, scratching their hairy heads like confused chimpanzees, inventing the wheel by tripping into a boulder at the right angle, and faceplanting into fire pits like toddlers with anger issues and wooden clubs. They've been cast as the original hot mess, permanently hunched, permanently dirty, and somehow always barefoot despite living on gravel. But what if that whole narrative is dead wrong? What if cavemen weren't oafs, barely dodging extinction, but low-key geniuses, scrappy innovators, who MacGyvered their way through sabertooth attacks, food shortages, and volcanic tantrums with nothing but sticks, sharp rocks, and unsettling confidence? What if behind every hairy brow and awkward grunt was a mind quietly calculating angles, wind resistance, and mammoth footspeed? Maybe the real mystery isn't how humanity survived, but how prehistoric brilliance got lost in translation, mistaken for clumsiness just because no one thought to check if the guy in the loincloth was solving physics in his head. Rocks were basically laptops. A sharp rock doesn't exactly scream genius until you see what it can do in the hands of a determined caveman with a bison to butcher and zero patience. That same humble chunk of stone could slice meat, crack open bones for marrow, carve spears, dig holes, or even serve as an early edition of Dear Diary on the walls of a cave. To the untrained eye, Paleolithic tools might look like yard debris, but to early humans, they were high-tech hardware. Each stone, carefully chosen, napped at just the right angles, and refined through a process of relentless trial, bloody, error, and intuition so sharp, it may as well have come with its own patent. The hand axe? That wasn't just a weapon. It was a prehistoric Swiss Army knife, minus the branding, the tweezers, and the questionable corkscrew. These weren't aimless rock bashers. These were early engineers who understood materials science without having ever read a manual. They knew that obsidian made blades so sharp you could perform surgery, or just slice mammoth sashimi. They learned to heat-treat flint to make shaping easier, long before anyone figured out how to boil water without screaming. This wasn't caveman chaos, this was innovation with dirt under its nails. Fire wasn't an accident, it was a project. The myth that some sneezy Neanderthal accidentally coughed on dry grass and invented fire is the ultimate insult to Paleolithic brilliance. That version turns one of humanity's greatest breakthroughs into a slapstick cartoon. In reality, making fire with sticks and stones isn't even remotely intuitive. It's the result of grit, repetition, and a surprisingly advanced grasp of friction, airflow, and sheer monk-level patience. This wasn't luck. This was deliberate science in loincloths. And once fire was harnessed, it wasn't just about roasting meat or warding off frostbite. It was civilization's first cheat code. Fire extended the day beyond the sun, lit up the darkness like a prehistoric nightlight, and turned raw mammoth meat into digestible brain fuel. Cooking alone was a major evolutionary flex, delivering more calories with less chewing, which freed up time for things like making tools, drawing on cave walls, or inventing sarcasm. And the fire itself needed constant supervision. That wasn't a job for the forgetful or easily distracted. The Firekeeper wasn't the guy who got picked last for hunting. He was the tribal MVP. He had to read ash-like tea leaves, understand the moods of smoke, strategize how to dry wet wood in rainstorms, and shield the flame from wind tantrums. Early fire mastery wasn't a comedy of errors. It was survival science, taught by trial, error, and singed eyebrows. A wilderness PhD handed down in smoke signals and calloused hands. Language was basically code-breaking with grunts. The stereotype is painfully familiar. A caveman stares blankly, points at something vaguely threatening, lets out a grunt that sounds like a broken accordion, and maybe hurls a rock for emphasis. But the reality is far more impressive, and far less monosyllabic. Early humans weren't communication challenged. They were masters of expressive subtlety. They used tone, gesture, rhythm, and facial expression to convey meaning in ways that would make even the most seasoned improv actor sweat. Their vocal range wasn't limited to caveman ASMR. It allowed for nuance. Their brains could decode intent from a mere grunt, twitch, or side-eye glance. Language didn't just fall from the sky. It evolved, layer by gritty layer, from the primal need to cooperate, share, warn, flirt, and probably complain about mammoth poop. Grunts weren't dumb. They were optimized. One grunt might mean duck now, another food over here, and yet another zug is standing too close again. But add a gesture, a squint, or a flailing arm, and suddenly it's a full sentence. Proto-languages weren't just sounds, they were living systems, fluid and tribe-specific, like regional dialects made of throat noises and eyebrow choreography. Some sounds probably had double meanings, depending on rhythm and stress, an early version of tone policing. A single gesture might shift a grunt from danger to danger, but it's funny. And yes, sarcasm likely emerged the moment someone slipped into a mud pit and the tribe spent 20 minutes laughing while saying, "Nice walk, Grog," with just the right smirk and eyebrow lift. Cave art wasn't hobby, it was high-tech storytelling. Those mammoth paintings on cave walls. They weren't just primitive doodles scribbled by bored cavemen waiting for dinner. They were immersive media, prehistoric IMAX, complete with emotional arcs and surprisingly good lighting. Using homemade pigments brewed from crushed minerals, charcoal, animal fat, and yes, sometimes spit, early humans crafted narrative murals that pulsed with motion, scale, and atmosphere. These weren't random animals slapped on a wall. Many of them showed sequences: mammoths mid-stampede, bison surrounded by spears, hunters in coordinated chase. That's not idle art therapy. That's storyboarding. And some of it was downright cinematic. Artists used the natural contours of cave walls to create the illusion of depth, letting torchlight animate their work. As shadows flickered across the surfaces, the animals seemed to move, charging, breathing, fleeing, as if the stone itself had come to life. These caves became prehistoric theaters, places to tell stories, teach young hunters, bond tribes, or maybe even cast a little ritual magic for luck and mammoth steak. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just a one-cave wonder. Similar artistic styles and themes popped up across continents, suggesting a kind of shared visual literacy long before alphabets or books. These weren't just cavemen. These were muralists, myth-makers, and memory keepers, turning walls into timelines, torchlight into animation, and spit-based paint into cultural legacy. Their social systems were complex. It's tempting to think early humans lived in chaotic free-for-alls, ruled by whoever had the biggest stick, but evidence shows coordination, fairness, and empathy. Bands cooperated, they shared food, resources, and child-rearing. Injured members weren't abandoned, they were cared for. Skeletons with healed bones proved that survival wasn't just individual, it was communal. They had social rules, not written, but understood. Sharing meat was expected, greedy behavior was remembered, conflict happened, but so did reconciliation. Tribes had peacemakers, clowns, storytellers, and likely even therapists. The wise, weird elder who always had something strange but useful to say. Hierarchy existed, but it was flexible. Leaders rose based on experience, not brute force. And if a leader got bossy, people could just leave. No locks, no contracts. The first political protest was probably just walking to another campfire. Child care was a group project. Modern parenting often feels like a high-stakes, underfunded two-person operation, or, more often, a sleep-deprived solo mission powered by cold coffee and existential dread. But early humans figured something out that modern society keeps forgetting. If raising kids is hard, maybe don't try to do it alone. Instead of isolating parents with a crying potato and no manual, prehistoric tribes raised children collectively. Grandparents, siblings, neighbors, cousins twice removed, everyone pitched in. It wasn't just about keeping the kid alive, though that helped. It was about building identity, trust, and memory across generations. Songs weren't just lullabies, they were lessons. Games weren't just distractions, they were training simulations for real-life mammoth dodgeball. Play was practice, and every elder was both a babysitter and a living library. And let's not forget the ridiculous design flaw of human infants, born basically useless. No claws, no fur, can't walk, can't feed themselves, just a potato with lungs. But early humans didn't see that as a problem. They saw it as potential. Longer dependence created deeper bonding. More bonding led to more learning. That extended childhood became an evolutionary superpower, allowing for bigger brains, richer knowledge, and adults who could remember where they left their spear. Humanity didn't survive in spite of needy children, it thrived because of them. and because every village really did raise every child, often while someone sang and someone else tried to stop them from eating dirt. Early medicine wasn't witchcraft, it was chemistry. Sure, early humans didn't have pharmacies stocked with shiny bottles and unreadable labels, but what they lacked in packaging, they made up for with plants, instincts, and a surprisingly sharp memory for what didn't kill them. They knew that chewing willow bark eased pain. That's basically ancient aspirin with bark flavor. They used charcoal to treat poisoning long before it became trendy in lattes. Honey wasn't just a treat, it was slathered on wounds for its antibacterial superpowers. Certain clays soothed upset stomachs, moss became nature's bandage, and poplar resin was the go-to for toothaches, which probably felt like minor miracles back then. And just to spice things up, archaeologists found a cave stash full of dried psychoactive seeds, proof that someone was absolutely microdosing, either for spiritual enlightenment, pain management, or just to make cave life a bit weirder. But make no mistake, this wasn't chaotic nibbling and hope. Trial and error didn't mean reckless roulette. It meant carefully watching, remembering, and passing on what worked. If one guy chewed some bark and stopped groaning, you took mental notes. If berries made your cousin see spirits but also cleared his rash, well, you marked that down as a maybe. Eventually, out of all this organic experimentation emerged the shamans, not just feather-wearing forest weirdos, but the tribe's living libraries. They were part botanists, part biologists, part therapists, and part spiritual guide, carrying centuries of plant wisdom in their heads and probably smelling like 12. Travel was not wandering, it was strategy. Nomadic life sounds aimless. In reality, it was brilliantly orchestrated. Early humans mapped landscapes mentally. They remembered watering holes, fruiting trees, migration patterns. They timed their movements with the seasons. They knew how to navigate by stars, winds, animal tracks. And these migrations weren't isolated. Bands crossed paths, shared tools, shared mates, shared news. There were networks of contact. Knowledge spread like gossip, fast, sticky, and useful. There were travel routes across continents before roads existed that required foresight, memory, and adaptability most modern GPS users can only dream of. One wrong turn back then wasn't annoying, it was fatal. They moved with reason, purpose, and an intuitive understanding of the land that bordered on supernatural, but was really just really good pattern recognition. Humor existed and it was advanced. The assumption is that humor came later, after language, leisure, and literacy, but jokes are older than civilization. Humor relies on timing, social awareness, and perspective-taking, all signs of intelligence. Laughter bonds groups, diffuses tension, signals safety, teases authority. Cave humor probably involved mimicking animals, making absurd faces, telling exaggerated stories about hunts gone wrong. Someone definitely invented slapstick, someone else invented sarcasm, probably too early and too effectively. And what about cave pranks? Someone had to be the first to replace a spear with a stick or shout sabertooth during dinner just to watch people jump. Humor wasn't decoration, it was survival. It made hard times bearable. It kept groups cohesive. The tribe that laughs together. Innovation never stopped. Innovation didn't come in spurts, it was constant. Early humans adjusted faster than the environment did. New techniques, tools, traps, shelters, they adapted to cold, drought, predators, and boredom. They domesticated dogs, transforming wolves into guardians, hunting partners, and probably foot warmers. They adjusted diets, added fish, crushed nuts, fermented berries, invented accidental soup. They built boats, crossed rivers, climbed mountains, dug pits, built shelters from bones, snow, mud, and mammoth hide. And they didn't just survive, they passed it on, taught the next generation better, smarter, more efficiently. That's not slow evolution, that's community-level intelligence in real time. The image of cavemen as grunting half-wits is comforting, but false. These weren't primitive fools tripping through prehistory. They were innovators, artists, scientists, and social engineers navigating a deadly world with no guidebook and no safety net. They built tools with no blueprint, started fires without matches, cared for the wounded, raised helpless children, painted stories on walls. mapped continents in their heads, laughed when everything hurt, loved each other in a world where love didn't guarantee survival. They were smart, not modern smart, not standardized test smart, but primal, adaptive, inventive smart. The kind of smart that survives ice ages, fends off predators, and figures out how to turn a rock into a revolution. So next time someone uses caveman as an insult, remember, these were the people who figured out how to be human before anyone even knew what that meant. And that is genius.